What a wonderful calling into the word we've been given today as we enter into a time of unbinding our prayers. Will you join with me as we go to a word of prayer? O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts gathered in this place this day be acceptable in your sight. O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Have you been born again? Over the years, I've been asked that question by inquiring minds interested in the state of my Christian well-being. I imagine that question perhaps has been asked of you on occasion also. I wonder, how do you respond to that question? Are you or have you been born again? Now, I have to confess, when that question comes my way, I feel the awkwardness of it because it feels like it's being used as a litmus test to see if my Christian faith is valid in the eyes of that person. The question source comes from the Gospel of John, chapter 3, when Jesus was approached by a Pharisee by the name of Nicodemus, who said, "Rabbi, we know that you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do the signs that you do without God being with him." And Jesus responds to Nicodemus and says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless one is born anew, he cannot see the realm of God." To which Nicodemus logically responds, "Well, how can a person be born again when he or she is old? How can a person go into a mother's womb a second time?" And Jesus answered him, "Truly, truly, I say to you, no one is, unless one is born of water and spirit, he or she cannot enter the realm of God. That which is born of flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit." So when people ask me if I've been born again, I know where they're coming from. And I usually say, yes, I was baptized both by water and the Spirit. So there's an answer for you all. Write that down next time it comes your way. But some people take it further. They want to know more. They want to hear my conversion story, because being born in the Spirit means that I must have undergone a dramatic change in my life. You know, like what happened to Saul on the road to Damascus. Saul, the Christian catcher and killer, who was hit upside the head by a bright light that knocked him off his high horse. And in the midst of the chaos, he heard Jesus call out to him, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me so?" In that moment, Saul had not only a change of heart, but a total 180-degree change of life. He even changed his name to Paul, and he became one of the most effective apostles and missionaries to spread the good news of Jesus Christ. He was so effective, I think, because he had one of those stories that people could see the before and then the after. He was a walking billboard for what Jesus can do to change a life for the better. And I don't have one of those stories to tell. Like I shared last week, I've known Jesus all my life. He's been like that well-loved teddy bear that I held with me always, took everywhere with me for comfort and companionship. Asking those of us who've grown up in the faith what difference being a Christian has made in our lives is like asking us what it means to eat 3 meals a day. The Christian faith is natural to us. Trying to talk about it is difficult because there's not a definitive before and after for some of us in the room. Now, sure, there have been moments of epiphany, those aha moments along our way that have helped us understand God's nature and work and to make deeper commitments to being disciples of Christ. But those don't meet the qualifications for a true born-again conversion experience that people who ask the question are looking for. I have to admit that I've always been a little envious of those who've had those kinds of conversion experiences. I've often wondered if I shouldn't have just run off and gone crazy in my youth and childhood, perhaps, or lived a godless life and then come back like the prodigal. Then at least I would have a sense of understanding what these people are looking for when they ask me that question. But that wasn't the plan for my life. I believe God created me to be the one to welcome the prodigals home. I'm called to be the firm foundation for those to stand upon when the ground starts shaking in their lives. Like the time when I was helping the deacons at my previous church get ready for coffee fellowship before the 8:30 service began. I was outside on the porch setting up coffee cups while the coffee pot perked merrily away next to me, and I saw a man emerge from the dry riverbed beside the church. We call it a wash. His clothing was rumpled and stained, and in his long, shaggy hair and beard were stuck dried sprigs and leaves that he probably picked up while sleeping in that wash. He said he had smelled the coffee, and boy, did it smell good. Could he have a cup? I said, of course, and we began to chat. He said his name was Mark. He was from Tucson originally, but military had taken him away. He had served our nation in the first Gulf War. In fact, he told me he had just been released from the VA in Phoenix, but he really wasn't ready to get back to his old life yet. You know what I mean, Reverend? He asked me. I didn't know what he meant, but I nodded my head in understanding, because how could I understand what he had gone through while serving our nation and what wounds he carried? I invited him in to worship and thus began a beautiful and long relationship with Mark. He had grown up a Catholic, but not a very good one, he said. He really didn't believe in that stuff before the war, and then because of the war, with what he had seen, there was no way any of that was true, he said. Still, he was curious. He was curious about this Jesus and the people like us who followed him, who gave him coffee, who welcomed him in like he was one of us. So little by little, we read the Bible together, introducing him to the story of Jesus. And members of the church shared with him their well-worn teddy bear of a faith. And he began to ease into a relationship with God. And then one day, it hit him. Jesus came into his life, grabbed his heart, and wouldn't let him go. I can't describe it in any other way, but Mark came to my office to speak to me, and there was a light in him and a power about him that was not human doing. He said that Jesus had come to him in a dream and had told him he had a mission for him to help people, to heal people like himself, to bring them good news that would help repair their souls. He wasn't sure where to start, and I didn't know where to tell him to start. So we began to pray together, and we prayed for discernment. We prayed for guidance and direction. At one point I asked him, who were the most broken people that he encountered on the streets or in the washes or in the homeless encampments? And he said to me, the folks who were addicted to methamphetamines. I said, well, maybe that's the place where our prayers are leading us for your ministry direction. And he said, oh, Rev Deb, those people are the hardest people to change. That drug is evil. It does not let people go until they're dead. But the more we talked about it, the more he kept coming back to those faces on the streets. And he finally said, okay, let's just see what we can do for them. How do we start? Well, I didn't know. But we decided we'd open up our fellowship hall one day a week. During the week, Mark passed out pamphlets to offer a safe place for people to come in and talk and share. The first week, he and I sat there waiting, and we were the only two people to show up. The next week, 2 people showed up. The week after that, 2 more people showed up. After several months, we had a great small group going, and Mark's ministry took off. We commissioned Mark as a minister after a year of this outreach ministry, and after a year and a half, he moved out of our building and began his own 12-step church in downtown Tucson. Not only was Mark's life transformed, but through his encounter with Jesus, other people's lives were literally saved. His conversion story of a life-changing experience with Jesus is not my story, but I am a part of his story. And our church was a part of his story. And it's stories like Mark's that I get to share. My testimony is sharing the joy of being a part of life-transforming communities that help bring about change for others. It's a community that is open to sharing good news and our well-worn faith that brings comfort to others. We who are the always faith-filled have powerful stories to share because of what we've been able to witness in the lives of others. We just have to be aware that we have those stories around us. Mindful, Jamie and Justin, mindful of those things that happen right in front of us. And one of the best ways we can access those mindful places in our lives is by going deep into prayer, by being specific and directed with our prayers, by watching what God does with those prayers. We get to be a witness to the breathing, living God in action in our world. Now, some of us are dog paddle prayers. We pray the rote prayers on Sunday morning and maybe lift up a word of thanks at the supper table or right before we go to sleep at night. We keep our heads above the surface of the living waters because we trust that God's in control and everything will be cared for. We may think we're going deeper into the water by all the work we may do at church. You know, we church people are masters at hard work. We fill backpacks for kids getting ready to start school. We fill purses for their moms with things that they might need. We throw creativity camps and VBSs for our neighbors. We throw concert series performances and have fellowship events. Oh, we're busy people doing God's work. Churches aren't shrinking because we're lazy. Churches aren't shrinking because we're not reaching out to others to make a difference. But maybe it's because we're not dipping our nets into the right places. You know, like that story of the disciples who were fishing all night and they didn't catch a single thing. Jesus told them to drop their nets deeper. Drop your nets into deeper water, Jesus said. And then suddenly they caught a ton of fish. So too, I wonder, brothers and sisters, if our prayers need to go deeper. In our Hebrew scripture this morning, we heard about how Elijah went to a cave to pray. While there, you saw it acted out here. He was not able to hear God's voice because of all the noise of the wind and the earthquake and the fire, which equates to the noise of our lives, right? But it was only when Elijah entered that deep silence that the whisper of God was heard for him. Every week, a few of our elders gather at 7 a.m. on Tuesday mornings to lift up the prayers that you all have given us to pray over. Sometime within the last 6 years, I think it was, Patricia, when you challenged us to add another category to our list. We call it answered prayers. That came about when we saw that someone that we had been praying for over a long period of time. Peru Hindocha is one of those, right, David? I mean, we have a list of names of people we've been praying for a long time. And this person that we were praying for, I can't remember exactly who it was. But we didn't think they were ever going to go home from the hospital. And yet they did. And we realized this is an answered prayer. This is prayer at work. This is our prayers that have made a difference. For Christians who may not have their own conversion stories to share with others about how God and Jesus Christ turned their life around, perhaps it's by us being mindful of the way that God has answered prayer that is our testimony to share. This morning, and I'd like, Ken, I don't know if you could go back to the lights down here to turn them down. I'd like for us to see how the power of answered prayer can be a powerful gift of good news. Many of you remember on our prayer list the last couple of weeks we had the name of Michael Murphy on it. This morning, I'd like for you to hear from Michael about how much being on that prayer list and the power of prayer, how it made a difference in his life.